I very much enjoyed listening to the presentations, brief though they may be, and I think they raise a number of specific questions that I believe the participants here should be particularly concerned about in this back to work mode. I want to do a quick whip around, so I would prefer the answers be brief. But keeping in mind the participants that we have here, what's the most important thing you've learned or observed about your key customers and clients' back to work plans and planning? That is to say, when you engage with them with your particular expertise, what have you discovered about their readiness, their maturity, their thoughtfulness, their rigor as to their own back to work plans? I think I'd like to start with Ellen on this one. She's the last speaker, and we'll sort of whip around. What have you been learning from these organizations that they think they are or not going back? You've provisioned them with data. Are they dealing with it in a constructive way?
Well, I'd say, that's an interesting place to start, because a lot of companies have historically made these types of decisions without data, right? There's kind of this gut feel of who should I bring back first, or who is having the greatest impact. And I think it's been a real opportunity for us to be able to show for the first time that, no, this is something that should be made with data, and to try to change that gut feel mindset into something that's very specifically, it's measurable. And it's something you should watch over time. There's no single right answer. As you bring people back, you'll see how it goes, and hopefully you course correct and adapt in a nimble way to this data. I think, a lot of the companies we talk to have this very structured view of, first I'll bring back this team, and then this, and then there. And I think what we're learning is we're all learning, right? There's no precedent for this. And so we really are encouraging customers to have a test and respond mentality when it comes to this return to work process.
And that's a very interesting cultural challenge for organizations that are used to going down a punch list independent of the data, which makes Ronnie the next logical person to ask. Here you have organizations that literally have to go back to some sort of physical facility. Do you observe the same kind of data question or immaturity, or are your organizations more open? What have you learned from those organizations that really want to get more of their people back and more productive?
So what I've found, and it's been really interesting in looking at the data from the customers, that we saw an immediate crash in the amount of actual goods being produced.
Right.
That was the obvious thing. But what was in some ways surprising is that the engagement with our platform itself actually went up significantly. And to me, that was an indicator of some level of success within these organizations to transition at least some of their workforce to working from home, even despite the fact that they're making physical goods. And I think that if we're trying to think about it from a macro trend perspective, is that in a lot of these industries, which are still analog in a lot of ways, this will hasten a transition to digitization that just because of the availability.
It will accelerate their digital transformation plans and make them more driven. So absolutely. I want to go quickly to, thank you. I want to go quickly to Nisha. Your work is literally full of shit. You're working with public utilities, but you're also working with public health facilities. Are they sophisticated? Do they know what they want? Are they looking, do they know what signal to look for in what you provision? Or has your challenge been as much educational as presentational?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely, there's a big educational component to our work when we first start working with, again, whether it's a government client or a place of work or a university campus. But we've actually seen over the last few months that wastewater epidemiology is having a moment, so to speak. It's not just us, but there's researchers all over the world that are now
I'll drink to that, yes.
Yeah. They're doing this work. In fact, what we see, especially because now we're getting a lot of businesses reaching out to us to deploy at, manufacturing facilities, like headquarter campuses, things like that. And the main concern that we see is the question of, I don't even know when and at what frequency to test all my employees, for example. And so could wastewater data pulled from our plumbing system from the building be that indicator that triggers a test for all of our employees. So what we found is really the questions lie around like, what are the protocols that we should be working through in our like holistic sort of testing and employee care program?
Yeah, I think you're going to have real challenges putting together testing capabilities to complement and supplement what you do, whether you're a leading indicator or lagging indicator. I think is going to be very interesting. Jeff, you're the corporate representative here. What are you hearing that makes you feel, yes, this is pretty consistent with my knowledge, versus, yeah, these are a bunch of startups and they get to deal with edge cases instead of the real world?
Yeah, what I'm hearing, and just for perspective for the audience, my name is Jeff Delmar. I'm the corporate risk manager for FM Global. We have about 5,500 employees, about 30 physical locations, and we do work in about just over 100 countries. And I'm the lead of our corporate crisis management team, which is really the direct liaison with our executive team and all of our regional offices throughout the world. You know, I think I'm hearing a lot of the edge type cases. I think what we're seeing, and this goes back to what Ramesh was saying earlier, you know, we're seeing cultural nuances throughout the world and different levels of maturity as well in terms of where everybody is. And, you know,
let's be blunt. Is it a nuance or genuine disagreement?
Yeah, I would say disagreement. Yeah,
okay.
A disagreement. I think it's a way of life that's ingrained in each culture, and I think it's been there for some time and will continue to be. So it's really understanding those and understanding how to work with and adapt to them. If you think of what we do as a company, we send engineers out to these sites to inspect locations. And so, you know, what we're seeing is we're starting to see the development of how do they treat visitors? Are there QR codes? Are there other apps that they're asking us to engage in to self-assess our own health and then be available for contact tracing later? But I will say that this is very grassroots. There's not a lot of this that we're seeing, and most of it's very manual to date.
So you would say that technically most of the organizations are immature.
When it comes to the interaction with us, you remember now, we don't know what they're doing behind doors with their own employees, but when we see the interface with us as a visitor to their site, yeah, very much so.
Well, Ramesh, you're the guy who's tasked with, if not bringing maturity, at least novel capability. And you testified before Congress, always a fun time. What's the level, what have you learned? Let me put a thumb on the scale here. Do you feel that there's a combination of ignorance as well as immaturity, and privacy uber alles and public health is secondary or tertiary? Or are you too discovering that people may be more open to innovation than you expected?
I think the level of maturity in the conversation is improving rapidly, how to say, and there's a lot of serious conversations including the Congress. And I think people have realized that this is not a technology problem. It's not just a biology problem. It's really a societal problem, because unlike a hurricane, you know, epidemics are about people infecting other innocent people, right? So it's really like a people-to-people interaction. And so I feel like when it comes to the things we care about in my world, about technology and computing and smartphones and Bluetooth and so on, it has been a bit of a wild west. Think of like internet before the 95. And then we started seeing maturity, W3C, HTTPS, you know, all these amazing protocols keep coming up. So, but we have gone through that whole process in a matter of 3 to 4 months. So that's why it feels like sometimes things are not mature, but actually a lot of good people are thinking very seriously. When it comes to employers, there's a lot of friction between the departments, because the IT department thinks they can just deploy it.
Right.
HR department says, hey, maybe this is an opportunity for us to learn more about our employees. So why don't we do more? And the legal department says, we don't want to do this at all. We don't care about the efficiency of the employees. Safety and liability is more important. So there's a lot of friction between those organizations. And I think PathCheck really comes in because we say, you know what, you can solve all those problems and deal them in a privacy preserving, ethical, and you know, in a legal way. So I think just the fact that we can do both simultaneously is magical, because that's where the MIT magic comes in.
I think that's a very good point. And I do think it's interesting, drawing on your own background, that you do think in terms of protocols and standards. And that's a way of creating reducing the costs of friction and the difficulties of friction. So we'll go in sort of reverse order here with the second question, because you've set things up very well. In the next 90 days, whether or not we really do go back to work or there's a spike or a second wave, what are you seeing is the biggest challenge that your partners, that your organizations don't really understand as well as you think they should understand?
Yeah. I'm a techno-optimist, so I'll start with kind of criticizing myself. I think a lot of people have become techno-optimist, suddenly. They think, whoa, maybe some cool Bluetooth tag will solve it, or maybe I can have widespread testing and I can get a very good, or I will do antibody testing. People have become very techno-optimist, which is good for people like us because they're willing to spend a lot of money and resources to do it. But I don't think we're going to be able to solve most of these issues in the short term. For those technologies to harden, to mature, look at the false positives and false negatives, is going to take us a lot of time. And that's where I think things like UX, things like behavior science, things like ethics and privacy are going to play a pretty big role. So the techno-optimist in me always wants to take a backseat in this situation.
So like Fred Brooks, no silver bullet in that regard.
Absolutely.
Ronnie, I'm going to...
Very collaborative.
Yes. Ronnie, question to you. Same question to you.
Yeah, I think that my answer is not just within our customer base, but also within our own company. I think this is probably pretty universal in that, we made the transition, everybody made the transition to working home very suddenly, and now everybody was equalized because everybody was working from home. And so there was new kinds of communications and and sort of a cultural change that had to occur. But as we start coming back to work and it's phased and it's not everybody coming back at the same time, I think one of the key challenges that is not being effectively addressed is how to phase people back in and maintain a new kind of culture. Like, for example, it's one thing when you have a meeting where everybody is in a video conference, but it's completely different when half of them are remote.
Right.
And so what do you do in that case?
So you're ironically or appropriately, you're raising the hybrid culture for a hybrid return issue.
Yeah.
That's a perfect lead into Ellen, obviously, because that's exactly the sort of stuff that Human Eyes in theory should be instrumenting.
Yeah, I think Ronnie's exactly right. I think this hybrid mode is a lot harder than when everybody is at home or everybody is in the office. And I think it is going to force new ways of working. I think it's interesting because you look at some companies like, tech companies like Twitter, for example, they announced like, hey, no need to come back. You can all work from home for the foreseeable future. And I think while that is great from a physical health perspective, I think from an organizational health perspective, that's probably not the ideal answer. And I would say one of the real challenges that we're seeing is people's networks are shrinking, right? So the people I need to do my job day to day, I still talk to them day to day. The people I had less contact with or the incidental contact or I'd see in the hallway, that's often an important part of long-term innovation and collaboration and so forth. And I think that's the part that's not happening today. And I think that part is also going to be tricky when we're in this hybrid mode because you'll see some people and you'll think, hey, this is good. But again, the organizational networks we've seen are contracting. And I think that has some longer term challenges which aren't yet fully understood.
Jeffrey, is that consistent with your knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, if I think of the things that I feel are not being considered in some cases, I think about, what is the true impact to the employee at the end of the day? In this world where it's become very easy for all of us, and many of us in certain industries to work from home, what does that mean to the business in terms of capital expenditure? What does it mean in terms of information security? The person that works in the coffee shop, that work at their house, now in mass numbers. How does this impact team building? Going back to what Ronnie was saying, and some of these more soft issues that employees would typically be face to face, and now how do you bring a new person on board? I hired somebody 3 months ago. I've never actually met them in person. I mean, there's all these soft issues that come up. And then you look at clients and, how are they going to react to this? And how's that going to impact your business? As I mentioned, some of the work we do is go out to clients well, what if they won't let us come? Or what if they put a stop sign up? How do we need to adapt with using technology to get our job done? And so there's really a lot of pieces to this that have to be looked at, especially as this becomes a longer term problem.
I think that the issue, it's sort of ironic because you're, if not a techno-optimist, you're looking for those kinds of tools as an option for you going forward. Nusha, what's the challenge that you've been observing in that regard? Do you feel that as the education process has gone through, people are asking you smarter questions, or are they just looking at you to do a diagnostic or manage risks associated with public health within a certain confidence level?
Yeah, I would say that a little bit of both. So, I think there's definitely some folks that we work with who understand that, this is exactly the word you used. It's a diagnostic, it's an estimate. This shouldn't, our wastewater is an indicator. It's not a ground truth.
Right.
What we're analyzing via wastewater. And it really should not be replacing anything you're doing at the individual level, any contact tracing you're doing, it shouldn't be a replacement for any of the other solutions. If anything, it's just helping you be more targeted and tailored. But then we do talk to folks who are looking just for a tool that is a diagnostic and can tell them exactly what's happening. And so that's where that education piece needs to come in, and we need to work with folks to help them understand. And this honestly applies to both building level sampling, so place of work, university, but also at the municipal level when we work with cities or counties or states, that we really encourage folks to think about their holistic strategy and how this can just be one piece of what's needed for us all to resume life,
That's really my question. Do you think organizations that you're dealing with are thinking in holistic terms, or just give me more data terms so that I can show my city manager this,
right,
or I can show the building owners this, or the regulators that? That's what I'm sort of curious about, because that's going to be part of the whole back to work punch list that people have to fill out.
Again, I'd say it's a little bit, it's a mix. Definitely the more, I'd say the more sophisticated folks and the folks that have a lot of different, strategies that they're employing, they are thinking about this as one piece of a greater puzzle. But we do see folks that are just looking for, a testing that hits a bare minimum that then they show their supervisor, and are able to say whether the virus is present or not.
Interesting. So my last unfair question to you is, what portion of the people you deal with would you describe as sophisticated? 1 in 10, 1 in 5, 1 in 3?
Oh no, much more than that. We definitely work with
more than, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot more, over 50%. For
really?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the last quick whip round before we take questions from the audience is this one. What's the most important thing you're doing right now that people listening in on this webinar should take very, very super seriously in any back to work planning that they're doing? Ramesh?
I think what we have to realize is, for most companies, it's a zero-sum game.
Ooh.
Just because they have to deal with back to work doesn't mean they can stop everything else they're doing. And they're suffering just trying to keep up with their, bottom lines, employee retention, all those things. In addition to that, they have to worry about, back to work. So we cannot assume that they can drop everything else and somehow magically spend all the energy on back to work. So what we're doing at PathCheck is creating an open conversation, because nobody wants to work on back to work. They would rather like this be solved automatically, and they're not trying to build expertise in back to work either. So
Right.
What we're saying is, let's all come together on a platform that's open, kind of MIT style, at PathCheck Foundation. Let's figure out together what we can do in this space so we can all go back to what we like to do. So having that open conversation and not try to make this yet another project in your company is most important.
That's a very interesting expectations management approach. Ellen, do you see that with your folks at Humanize, or not so much? Is the transition more important than the steady state?
I really think it's both. I think Ramesh is right. I think, what we're seeing is
Everybody is being too educated. Well, commit, people.
So what I will commit to is that I think first and foremost, and I think the survey results suggested this, is it's all about employees' health and keeping people safe. I just think sometimes we see people underestimate the impact of organizational health, and it becomes the nth thing on the to-do list, and it becomes we'll get to that later as long as we have masks and disinfecting wipes around and so forth. And I think we're just trying to get people to think about organizational health and employee engagement are not quite as, very close second to the long-term success of the company, is really making sure that you don't overlook the employee side of that.
Yeah, I think you could have put them at the same level. I mean, if Nusha can sell on this, you can sell on this as well. Jeffrey, what's your take on this? Are Ramesh and Ellen accurate on this? Is there something that you're doing right now, or you're seeing one of your companies doing right now, that everybody on this webinar should be putting top of the queue?
First of all, they're completely wrong. No, I'm just kidding.
Go
No,
for it, Jeff. Go for it.
Ramesh, what are you doing? No, I think this is the answer to your question that you first posed is the thing that we're doing that is at the top of my mind every day, and that I think everybody should be thinking about as well, is fight the urge for back to normal. Fight the urge that this is a straight line and that there's an end 1 month, 2 months from now. I see it all the time. I hear it all the time about, okay, we do masks, we do social distancing, and guess what? We're moving towards this end goal. I don't see that. I see this thing as ebbing and flowing, and fighting, do all the planning you need to, but be flexible and nimble to say, you know what, despite all this planning, we're not moving. We're not going anywhere for the health of our employees.
Ronnie, do you see that with your back to work? Do the factories and the manufacturers want to, quote unquote, get back to normal, or are they keying off of what Jeff is saying and accepting the fact that this is, forgive me for using this cliche, a new normal or a new abnormal?
So there's some level in which they have to go back to the old way because there's, say, capital equipment set up for an automation line that you're not going to change that really. But what you will see is a lot more cross training among the operators because you have to do more with less. So thinking about it from the perspective of like what we're doing about things, I'd say to grab the analogy of like never waste a good crisis is like, what are the things that that in this new reality, what is the things that we can accelerate? So whether that be like an acceleration of digitalization in some way, like the two things that we're doing internally at Tulip, one is that we're doing more dog fooding. We are using, for example, this facilities app bundle like in our own office. We're using our own product on ourselves.
Yes.
As a way that
nobody
whether
ever
it
calls
be
it cat fooding, by the way. Have you noticed that?
I haven't. Very true. But another example of that is like because typically we spend a lot of time at customer sites and we are not able to visit them anymore. So it's actually accelerated our efforts to do 100% remote deployments with our customers. That's something that we would.
Remote diagnostics is a next gen thing for you. You've doubled down on remote diagnostics.
Remote, I say deployments and diagnostics. So
okay.
So instead of sending, right. So we work in a very physical space, but we're doing a lot of that work virtually that we would have done previously in person. And that's something that we had talked about doing a lot more before, but all of a sudden it became very relevant. And so why waste that opportunity to push forward with it?
Excellent. Cheryl, what kind of questions do we have? What are the best ones that we have?
Well, so one question is, to what extent does political leadership play into the success of getting back to work safely? Or can we do this in spite of political leadership?
Well, no leading the witnesses there. Who wants to volunteer for that one, Ramesh?
I think there are certain things that do need to be centralized. So it's been a struggle. I think the leadership has come from corporations as opposed to the political leadership in this country. And I think everybody acknowledges that. I'm not saying anything new. Fortunately, the scene is changing. And now I think we might get into a regime where we don't want the political interference and we don't want the political leadership, because I think the industry and the innovators are going to go solve it as we get to this stage. Nevertheless, there are certain things.
Just to be clear, you believe that we're hitting a point where market-led standards and protocols, as was the case with the internet, are really going to be more important than what a president or the CDC or a mayor or a governor says. That's what you're seeing. I just want clarity on that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure in the digital space. I mean, whether PPEs and hospitals should be ready and so on, clear vaccine should be ready. That's a different ball game.
Right.
But talking about the digital space, I think the market forces are getting together. All the role that PathCheck is really playing. PathCheck should not be in the business wherever market forces are going to solve the problem anyway. The role that PathCheck is playing is making sure that the things we really care about, ethics, privacy, inclusivity, liability, and so on, it really comes together. So we're playing a role like Mozilla or W3C, you can imagine, to make sure this ecosystem is evolving in the right way. On top of that, we have our own flagship apps and dashboards. We need that because we have to prove that it's actually working. We cannot just be talking about it theoretically. So we actually deploy and try them out, but we also work with many other partners to see if this is going along. So at this stage in the digital space, I think it's a regulation that this should be private and ethical is more important than anything else.
Nusha, you're in the hybrid domain, but if anybody else wants to speak up on political versus market leadership or political and market leadership, feel free.
Well, it's a little interesting that the two largest market influences, Apple and Google, have partnered up to form a gigantic market influence, and they are requiring the government to take part. So you can't roll their solution without a government agency alongside you. So that's just an interesting combination of market and politics.
Well, no, that ties into Jeff's work of insurance policies. Right, Jeff?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think that, in terms of where we're headed, I mean, this is it's new territory. And I think I think from our perspective, we're continuing, despite my comment about fighting the urge. There's great technology on this call and great technology being developed. But I think when you get to the place where you can actually use it and use it confidently, then that's the time to do so.
Other comment on politics?
If I can just make a quick reminder / plug here. So at MIT, very soon we're going to announce effectively an innovation center for pandemic resilience and getting back to work. And you'll hear from us very soon about that. And we would love to get, of course, all the organizations on this call to participate. And we'll have announcements coming up about that. And going back to your question, Michael, whether it should be government policy or a think tank or some kind of a framework, if you think about Auto ID Center that's promoted by Sanjeev Sharma, is a classic example where market forces were just not making it happen. And Walmart and DoD eventually had to come together and say, hey, this is how we're going to do it. And things worked out together. So you'll hear from us very soon about that center.
Very interesting. Next question, Cheryl.
So here's one. What will be your first priority once COVID numbers have dropped to almost zero and or the world has been vaccinated?
Wow.
That's the question.
You start with that one.
Hold on, is that a poll or I should be answering the question?
That's a question.
For me?
Yes.
Okay, all right, yeah. Thank you. You're talking about an existential crisis. What do we do? Are we going to be a one-trick pony and go to sleep? So first of all, I'm not a biologist. Some of the people on this call are. This is going to be with us for next 2 to 5 years, at least. Vaccines typically take anywhere between 4 years to 10 years to actually deploy. If you speed them up, maybe 3 years to get the last person on Earth, the vaccine. And of course, because we're doing them in a rush, they will not be effective for most of the population in the beginning. I think the best way I've heard is that the people who can afford the vaccine won't take the risk because it's unproven, and people who really need them won't have the money to get vaccinated. So that's the challenge we're going to run into. But going back to what PathCheck is doing, our goal is to create a privacy-preserving solution. In the beginning, it's about contact tracing. Then it's about testing, medication, virus analysis. And going forward, we want to create a platform for public health so that we are not just ready for epidemics and pandemics, but we're also ready for other public health challenges. It could be common flu, it could be digital health, or it could be the next pandemic. So we need that investment to keep this going. I think the current crisis is putting a lot of focus on what we're doing, but we're like a plumber. Don't just think of us when the pipe breaks.
So I want to ask a last question then on this. There is a theme that cuts through all of the presentations, all of the conversations this afternoon. And that is, it's clear that data governance and better and more timely data lineage, data quality, the feature issues that you identified for anonymization, aggregation, your data splits or mesh, that's very, very important. I would like to ask you, in your dealings with your clients, how would you characterize their sophistication around issues, not of analytics, but of data governance, data as an asset? How good of a job do you think they do? Can we start with Ronnie on this?
So I think in terms of data governance, our customers are very, very private with their data always, and keep it very internal, and have been, even like in the manufacturing industry in general, has been like one of the last to enter the land of the cloud and the internet in general. So I think they pay a special attention to that governance, and see that especially for our GMP customers. So these are pharmaceutical manufacturers for which there is a full set of standards under which
they have compliance issues. I mean,
exactly
right. That's data. That's what the lawyers tell you to do. You have to do it. In terms of maturity and sophistication, and in the value-added issues that you have, how sophisticated would you say their data governance is?
I'd give them a B minus.
B minus. Jeff, what about you? C, C plus?
It ranges because our clients, obviously based on the level of sophistication, the size, they run the whole gamut. But I would say B to B plus, and I only say that because part of the inspection and the analysis that we do is we look at their cyber and data collection practices as part of the insurance policy that we provide. So we do have a good sense for the data governance and recommendations for where we see it's weak.
How about you, Ellen?
What I feel like what I'm seeing is that the data governance comes up against risk aversion, right? So depending who is calling the shots, the data could be very safely handled, safely transferred, safely evaluated. But if, again, somebody mentioned if it's the lawyers or, if there's not an understanding of how the data is being handled, then it can be like, well, wait, I just shouldn't take that risk, regardless of what great insight I could get or the impact it could have on my business. So I think that some of the tension that we're seeing is this notion of, do people understand, what it is and what the protections are, and are people willing to?
Do they treat data? Do your clients treat data as an asset, or is it data?
Probably some of each. I think that there are few of our customers that have really figured out all the ways to tap it. For example, with the Black Lives Matters movement that's going on now, that's another thing that you can look for in the communication data. Is there any bias, right? And I think there's a lot of companies that really want to understand that. They really want to be able to say, we don't exclude any particular group. We are an equal opportunity and employment environment. But I think the reality is they don't want to look at it, because if they don't know what they're going to find, then it could point to the fact that they're not fully there yet. So I think, whether it's around COVID, whether it's around many different issues, sometimes there's just this fear of, if I have that and if I know the answer and if I don't take action, am I then exposed, or am I then have you turned my ignorance into negligence?
Very good. Nisha, what about the utilities and organizations that you deal with? Do they understand data governance, or is really that one of the things you have to educate them about?
No, I'd say, again, because the folks that we work with are individuals who are proactively looking for an early indicator. They're proactively going outside of the standard data that they're receiving and that they're making decisions off of. So I'd actually say that people are very aware of the power of data.
Very good. So in a way, you're lucky. You're self-selected to people who are sophisticated as to the value of this.
Exactly.
And you really do train them or educate them on some of the nuances and implications because you have a broader view in that regard.
Exactly.
Very good. So Ramesh, we began with you, we'll end with you. What insights around data governance and data maturity would you share, and what would you encourage in the webinar participants listening in on this call?
Yeah, I think Ronnie gave it, I think I said B minus, but let me give also kind of the dark side of it, which is the dark web. What people have to realize is that all our data, including all your employees' data, is actually available on dark web. And people are running all kinds of analytics on it to figure out what your company is doing, and they're selling that intelligence, so-called business intelligence, to others. So if you...
I thought, just to be clear, I thought you were the techno-optimist, but do go on.
Yeah, so here's the next part, hopefully will show some hope. So if any organization is thinking about, let's go one step beyond that, and let's also figure out how our employees are interacting with each other, where they're working and non, and centralize that data, and somehow we can manage it. That's just not going to happen, because even that data, because of poor governance, is going to disappear and appear on the dark web, which means the competition will know even more about who your employees are meeting, when are they meeting, are they traveling or not, which deals are going through, purely based on their mobility and purely based on their social graph. So it'll be a mistake for an organization to say that for the sake of COVID-19, let me learn more about my employees and centralize that data, because that will get breached either through a rogue employee or poor governance. And you're going to create more competitive pressure for yourself by releasing that data about your employees' movement. So let's not do that. And let's come up with solutions that are privacy preserving, at the same time will allow your employees to recover from this crisis.
That's a very interesting insight, and one that we'll have to think about no matter when we go, quote unquote, back to work in this regard. So Cheryl and Rebecca, I think that it's a terrific panel discussion, and I'd like to turn it over to you to summarize and tell us what's going to happen next. Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists. You guys are terrific.
Great. Thank you, Michael, for moderating that. I got a message from my colleagues saying that you're a ninja moderator, so you killed it. Thank you. Cool. Yeah, I just want to make sure there's still a bunch of questions people asked for the individual startups. Do you want to give people a chance to answer that? Cheryl, do you want to take some of the specific questions for Nisha, for others?
Yeah, we certainly can do that. So for Humanize, one of the questions was, do you monitor emails, and can you be specific about what the input data is?
So we don't monitor anything, but what we get is, first of all, all the employee name, employee ID, email is stripped, and the company provides a hash ID, so we don't ever know who it is. And we just know that it went from, employee X to employee Y, and the timestamp, right? So the fact that the communication happened, we'll know, which organization, which geography, and the time that it was happening. But we don't know anything about what they were talking about, or specifically that it was, Ramesh talking to Rebecca or Nisha talking to Roni.
Great, thank you. Nusha, showing that that your testing can be predictive by approximately a week for reported cases, how might we think about those that are asymptomatic in this data?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I didn't have a chance to talk about it during my presentation, but asymptomatic individuals do also shed the virus in stool, and so we do pick up on that asymptomatic population in our testing and our sampling, which is what makes it so compelling as like an early indicator. And in fact, with the municipality case study, when we work with communities and municipal sewage, our case estimates tend to be like an order of magnitude higher than what's clinically reported, because we are picking up on all of those asymptomatic individuals as well.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone being here and making a great panel to help our corporates think about how to approach the question of returning back to work. There were a lot of good thoughts generated. We ran a poll on follow-ups. So those of you who filled out the poll, it would be given to the ILP program directors to try to make that connection. And definitely we will also have the recording online for you to follow up. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.